Welcome today. I'm so glad to see everyone. I'm Erin Waite, and I'm on the committee. The rest of our committee is here who plan the book club for all of us. And today I'm here to introduce our presenter, Kerrie Penney. But first, just a couple of announcements. I'll acknowledge the Treaty 7 land that we are on by mentioning two titles by Indigenous authors. Reading these titles is one small way to take acknowledgement into action. Our Voice of Fire is an award-winning memoir by Brandy Morin, and Prairie Edge by Connor Kerr was longlisted for a Giller Prize. So just a suggestion. We have a long tradition of meeting here at this hall, but we've learned that a construction project will prevent us from using this location in May, and hopefully you've all seen the notices that for Wednesday, May 20th, we will meet in Britannia at Temple B'nai Tikveh, which is at 947th Avenue Southwest. That final book club session for the season features Anne Logan presenting The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich. Also, you see on pillars around the room, there's a QR code, and that takes, if you take a picture of that and activate that, it takes you to a short survey that will give us really good feedback from all of you who've been our loyal participants this season. We'll use that information for planning next year. So it would really help us out a bunch if you just take a second and snap that picture of the QR code. I'm sure everyone in this room knows Calgary's beloved Big Book Sale takes place from May 8th to 17th at the Calgary Curling Club. Books can be donated between April 24th to May 3rd. So please check the Big Book Club website for details on donating your books and maybe even consider being a neighborhood collection point. We have a lovely add-on to today's presentation and the weather to support it. We've got a walk led by Lori Beatty. Lori's in the room, and at the end of our presentation, she'll come up and tell you a bit about the walk. But I'm hoping many of you have seen her book at the Owl's Nest Table, Calgary's Best Walks. And so after today's session, we'll leave from here and be led on a lovely walk, taking advantage of this moment of nice spring weather. Now I'd like to introduce Kerrie Penney. I had the very great pleasure of meeting and then working with Kerrie professionally. And being able to engage with her mind really was a highlight of the work I did. Kerrie has spent a lifetime channeling words as a radio producer, television host, narrator, director, and filmmaker. In 2018, she began a multi-genre exploration of mothers and daughters, fueled by her own mother's sharp decline and death. Kerrie's work is deeply influenced by a powerful Ukrainian maternal line that made the best out of very bad situations. Her work is seasoned with the experience of single mother, dutiful daughter, and imagined avenging angel. Kerrie's words have appeared in the New Quarterly, the YYC Poet Laureate Project, This Might Help, the Short Edition, and the Globe and Mail. Her first letterpress chapbook, My Garden Alphabet, was released in 2022. She wrote and directed the documentary Cat Call, The Other C Word, penned and narrated a short film for Burning Man's Ursa Mater installation. She's a past recipient of the Banff Television Fellowship and attended the Banff Centre Literary Arts Residency in 2018 and 2019. She describes herself as a cautious optimist on the cusp of crone. Kerrie is deeply curious about what is possible in the healing and revealing of true heart. She is the creator of the Secret Heart Broadcasting podcast and lives and works here in Calgary. Can I invite you to welcome Kerrie Penney?
Well, first of all, I'm just so thrilled to be here. The vibe in this room is wonderful, and some of my favorite mother-daughter duos are here today, so that's lovely. And I want to thank Erin and Jessica and the Big Book Club team for asking me to present on this book of essays, Mary Oliver's Upstream. So, Let's begin. I also wanted to thank Liz Soria in Canada and Lindsay Whalen in the US for sharing what they know about Mary Oliver, which has provided valuable scaffolding for today's Big Book Club talk. And I am very excited about the Mary Oliver inspired walk afterwards. And I was going to say too, this has a little bit where you can write, if you're going on the walk, you can write your observations. So bring a pen. Yeah, and that's a wonderful idea. And I just met Lori earlier, and wow, what a powerhouse. I'm looking forward to that. When Jessica first asked me to present on this book, Upstream, I knew I needed to do at least one early morning sunrise walk to get some sense of what Oliver was witnessing nearly every day for over 40 years. I regularly walk in the park near my home, but my walks are mid-morning or late afternoon because, unlike Mary Oliver, I do not wake early. Oliver, as many of you know, rose before sunrise and was out the door before 5 a.m. every morning with a notebook, a pencil, and usually a beloved dog by her side. She would walk in that time before the light with an open mind and observe what she was seeing. She didn't keep a diary per se, but she did write in a series of notebooks, again, observations about her walks, what she noticed, what had changed, what she encountered. She knew the landscape outside her door, and she wrote about the woods and the beach with a familiarity that can only come with great time spent there. She wonders if the trees recognize her. She's grounded and grateful, knowing it's the natural world that has saved her. She trusts that whatever will happen, will happen. She brings the discipline, which we'll talk more about, of a practiced open mind, and she expects nothing. And I think it's important to note that the time before the sun rises is, in fact, the darkest hour. And we don't normally wander into this kind of darkness alone if we can help it, but Mary Oliver did. It was a ritual for her, and it sustained her. Mary Oliver was as comfortable with the darkness as she was with the light. When I did my Mary Oliver walk, I was not comfortable with the darkness. And despite my proximity to and familiarity with Confederation Park and the urban natural world, I was afraid. On that day, it was nearly 10 degrees below zero. Mary Oliver lived in Provincetown, Massachusetts, on Cape Cod. The average temperature there that time of the year is a high of +10 and a low of +5. Anyway, as I mentioned, as part of my prep for this talk, and to understand a little more of Oliver, I rose more or less at sunrise on March 24th. A few days after the spring equinox, but you would not have known it. The songs of migrating birds did not wake me. I don't know what did. I didn't even set an alarm. I just woke up knowing that this was the morning, and I pulled my snow pants over my pajamas and put on my winter boots. I didn't even wake my husband. As I walked to the park in the woolly non-light before dawn, I did not feel open-minded and curious. I felt afraid. Mary Oliver was rarely afraid. Mary Oliver was born in 1935 in Maple Heights in northwest Ohio, an American suburb adjacent to a wooded area near to the city of Cleveland. Her mother, Helen M. Vlasic Oliver, was a secretary at an elementary school, and her father, Edward William Oliver, was a social studies teacher. And as you may know, hers was not a happy house. She tells this slant and was famously silent about her personal life, opening up only in her later years to share that her childhood was insufficient. She found salvation in the natural world, wandering in the woods near a stream by her house. She found salvation in writing. In her own words, the only A I ever achieved in school was for truancy. Oliver spent hours out of doors, and I'll read a bit from the opening essay, Upstream, the titular essay from this 2016 book. And I promise we'll get to more formal structure of the book, but first let's hear from Oliver. And if you have a book, I'm going to be reading from page 4 from the essay, Upstream. I walked all one spring day upstream, sometimes in the midst of ripples, sometimes along the shore. My company were violets, Dutchman's breeches, spring beauties, trillium, bloodroot, ferns rising so curled one could feel the upward push of the delicate hairs upon their bodies. My parents were downstream, not far away, and then further away because I was walking the wrong way, upstream instead of downstream. Finally, I was advertised on the hotline of help. And yet there I was, slopping along happily in the stream's coolness. So maybe it was the right way after all. If this was lost, let us all be lost always. The beech leaves were just slipping their copper coats. Pale green and quivering, they arrived into the year. My heart opened and then opened again. The water pushed against my efforts, then its glassy permission to step ahead touched my ankles, the sense of going toward the source. I do not think that I ever, in fact, returned home. Yeah. But of course, she had to return home. Oliver found herself writing poetry from the time she was about 10 years old, admitting later that those first poems, not surprisingly, were dreadful. But she kept at it. The discipline of walking in the woods, of taking notes, later of writing, was adopted early. She did not have the distractions of friends or a happy home. She knew she would leave as soon as she could, but in the meantime, like all children without agency, she had to find a way forward. And this is from the essay Staying Alive on page 14. Adults can change their circumstances, children cannot. Children are powerless, and in difficult situations, they are the victims of every sorrow and mischance and rage around them. For children feel all these things, but without any of the ability that adults have to change them. Whatever can take a child beyond such circumstances, therefore, is an alleviation and a blessing. She continues, I quickly found for myself two such blessings, the natural world and the world of writing, literature. These were the gates through which I vanished from a difficult place. So, armed with her copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass and a love of older poets like Emerson and Wordsworth, she set off into nature, building small houses of sticks, I know that's the next line, walking on all fours to understand the world from a different point of view. She committed to preserving a sense of whimsy in her life. She committed to looking, observing, witnessing. She said, so it comes first, the world, then literature, and then what one pencil moving over 1,000 miles of paper can perhaps sometimes do. And that's from the essay Staying Alive on page 21. Oliver might have been a quiet teenager, but she was writing and submitting her poetry. She wanted her words to be read. She'd also become enamored of the American poet Edna St. Vincent Millay, and while still in high school, wrote to Millay's sister Norma to inquire about the possibility of coming there, to Austerlitz, New York, and Millay's estate Steepletop, and helping put the poet's papers in order. Again from Oliver. When I was still in high school in 1953, I wrote to Norma Millay, the poet's sister, asking if I might visit the poet's home where Norma Millay was then living. The answer was yes. So sometimes the emboldened young fly into their lives. I lived there off and on for a good number of years. I don't know if spirits always haunt their earthly homes, but I know that sometimes they do. Her presence was everywhere. She left the countryside of New York to work with Norma Millay the day after she graduated high school. She was 17. In the short time between her early childhood and graduating high school, Oliver had witnessed a lot of changes to the natural world she loved. Those woods where she built small houses of sticks and read Walt Whitman are changing. America was booming post-war. More houses were being built on pristine land, along with shopping malls and roads. The world was changing. She saw it and she knew it. The woods outside Edna St. Vincent Millay's home at Steepletop were different from the ones Oliver had grown up with. And although I couldn't find any writing to suggest that she spent time in those woods, I think we can assume she did. There's also not a lot written about who came to help sort the papers of St. Vincent Millay. Later, that estate would be an artist colony. Steepletop was where Oliver met the photographer Molly Malone Cook, who was 10 years older and had been photographing the estate. They didn't immediately begin a relationship. That would happen a few years later in New York. But Oliver admits from that moment on, she was in a lifelong conversation with Cook. So she met the love of her life at Steepletop, and she also stayed there off and on for several years. And now I must take a drink of water. So, indulge me, but I wanted to know a bit more about why. Oliver writes often and well about her early influences in this book, Whitman, Emerson, Poe, Keats, although not in this book. She was very much interested in poets of the past and also more formal forms like the sonnet. St. Vincent Millay wrote famous sonnets, and clearly she influenced the young Mary Oliver, yet Oliver does not even mention St. Vincent Millay in this book. So I was curious about this poet and why a 17-year-old high school girl would dedicate years of her life to help sorting through the papers of someone who was already 3 years dead. And some would say disgraced, so I was curious about that too. Now, a bit about Edna St. Vincent Millay. She was born on February 22nd, 1892. She attended Vassar from 1913 to 1917 and was serious about becoming an artist. She moved to New York City and began to write and party. She was famous for being sexually adventurous, unattached, a drinker, and later developed a dependency on morphine, some say to cope with her fading celebrity. Edna St. Vincent Millay was a rock star in the truest sense, and was once described as the greatest woman poet since Sappho. She was not a modernist, but preferred sonnets. She was not a woman who would pine over a broken heart or weep in public. Instead, she would make herself busy. In the poem, her poem, Witch Wife, she writes, "She loves me all that she can, and her ways to my ways resign. But she was not made for any man, and she never will be all mine." So Edna was a rebel, a witch, a woman, a leader, a nonconformist, the first woman to win the Pulitzer Prize at the age of 31 in 1923 for the book The Ballad of the Harp Weaver. Oliver would win this same prize 61 years later for her book American Primitive, and Oliver would be the sixth woman to do that. St. Vincent Millay was so ahead of her time, and this was well before poets like Anne Sexton or Sylvia Plath. The way in which she writes, using her own life, her own feelings, reminded me a little bit of the American writer Chris Kraus, who helped to pioneer the nonfiction novel. Later in her life, St. Vincent Millay was disgraced, allegedly for writing poetry in favor of the Second World War. Cut off by the literary world, she died a widow, alone, her body discovered by an employee. She died in 1950, but she lived loud and large and unapologetically. So, what teenage girl wouldn't be captivated? Before we leave St. Vincent Millay, I wanted to share a snippet of one of her poems, which many of us are probably very familiar with. But since researching this book report, I hear this poem in a whole new way. She writes, "My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes, and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light." Mary Oliver spent 7 years off and on at the Steepletop Estate, in between attending the University of Ohio and Vassar, but never graduating. Instead, she moved to the UK, where she lived for a short time in London and Scotland. Her first book was published in London in 1963. No Voyage and Other Poems was also published 2 years later in the US in 1965, which is where Oliver had returned to live. Oliver was always amused that No Voyage, that little book that a friend of a friend had published and that had met with almost no critical acclaim, would become so rare and valuable in her lifetime. There's a poem from that time called Being Country Bred, published in 1963, that is very much in the style of St. Vincent Millay. It's one of her earliest published poems, and she leans into what we already know. Being country bred, I am at ease in darkness. Like everything that thrives in fields beyond the city's keep, I own 5 wooden senses and a 6th like water. By 1964, Oliver was already in Provincetown with Molly Malone Cook, where they lived until Molly's death in 2005. They were quite poor, so Oliver's walks along the beach were not just to observe nature, but often to forage for food. She talks about this in the essay Sister Turtle. Now, I had not read that essay before reading this book, and I was struck by her honesty and the brutality and the natural cycles of the world. That she helped the turtle who was laying her eggs and later came back to remove several so she could eat them speaks to hunger and the appetite for living. Oliver was writing and publishing, but had little acclaim. In 1972, she published a collection called The River Styx, and 14 years after that first book, No Voyage, in 1979, came 12 Moons. She was not a famous poet, although she was publishing regularly in literary journals. She wasn't teaching much. These were lean years in what was then very much a working-class town. She and Molly were embedded in the community, a community primarily of Portuguese fishermen and their families. And it was in this town for over 40 years that she rose early to walk, to notice, to take notes, and to share what she had observed. She simplified her writing style. She meant her work to be read by real people, and therein lies her power. Real people read her. Oliver was, as I've mentioned, best known for being a poet. She came to prose later in her career, but it seemed a natural extension of the work she was producing. Her sentences are simple. They come together with purpose. And there's this delicious kind of syllabic sound that makes them a delight to read out loud. I hope you'll agree. Prose also allowed her to explore bigger themes and longer sections in which to move through time. She can take us back and forth and then back again. And almost all the essays in this book ache for the wildness of nature. She does not like to be closed in, although she writes about building a simple shack in the essay at the end of section 4 called Building the House. She admits in the end she barely used that house, which makes sense. "I don't care for the enclosure of buildings," she famously said. So I wanted you to have a sense of Oliver's life before she wrote this book, Upstream. Upstream was published in 2016 and was Oliver's second to last book. Her last book is the brilliant collection and quite a complete collection, Devotions, published in 2017. So Mary Oliver was very busy toward the end of her life. In fact, after Molly died, she left Provincetown for Florida and had found new love with Ann Taylor. This book is dedicated to Ann Taylor. And I do want to say that while Oliver is perhaps best thought of as a poet of the natural world, she is very much a writer of love poems. Her essays, of course, are different from the poetry, but one thing that remains consistent is that, as I've mentioned, both were written for real people and feature accessible language, as well as keen, sharp, and simple observations. A reader can easily enter the world that she creates, and once immersed, might emerge changed, but you have to stay with her. She pulls back what we think of as the reality of the moment and allows us to look at something else. She doesn't just ask that you stay with her, she expects it. And although she writes simply, you cannot flip through the pages. Or you can, but I mean, you're going to miss some of the magic of the world she's creating for you. And it's wonderful because you need only bring yourself. You do not need to be a critic, a writer, a poet, a scholar. You need only be human, and that is enough. Water break. How many people have read the book? I'm just curious. Okay, so you know the book is divided into 5 sections. Section 1, Upstream, My Friend Walt Whitman, Staying Alive, and of Power and Time. Section 2, Blue Pastures, The Ponds, Sister Turtle. Section 3, Emerson, An Introduction, The Bright Eyes of Eleonora, Poe's Dream of Recapturing the Impossible, Some Thoughts on Whitman, and Wordsworth's Mountain. Section 4 is the longest, Swoon, Bird, Owls, 2 short ones, Who Cometh Here and Ropes, Winter Hours, and Building the House. And Section 5 is the only essay in that section. It's called Provincetown. In Section 1, Oliver sets the scene for what's to come. We learn more about her, what she valued as a child, how she grew up. She implies darkness at home, and we clearly understand she does not want to stay there. We see how literature can change a life and in concert with nature can save it. She does not have an easy life, and she does not give up on her life. She will not abdicate her own responsibility, and she believes a better life is possible. And this, she realizes, will take discipline. And so, the walking, the nature, the inability to entertain fear, whether of the dark or of the future. We don't know if she's walking at dawn in those early years, but it's unlikely as she lived with her parents and had obligation to school. But that she walked, there is no doubt. That she got down on all fours and walked in the woods, there's no doubt. That she was curious and connected to life outside the buildings of her childhood, no doubt. And she knows there are others like her. Whitman is evidence. This awakens a thirst for other poets in her, Emerson, Wordsworth, Poe, and I believe Edna St. Vincent Millay, although, as I mentioned, Oliver does not mention her at all in this collection. We learn in this section the ideas that will connect all the essays, that it's good to be different, and if you are, you need to lean into it. More will be required of you to make a life. There will be the discipline, in her case, of walking, of noticing, and of writing. Oliver learns early, thanks to her proximity to nature, and I think lots of young people do not have the same proximity to nature that Oliver had, which is too bad. But she learns the wild world is connected, that we are part of it, that it is part of us, that it's unpredictable and beautiful, and there are no guarantees. Although I think she explores that last theme in a bit more detail and with a more mature eye later in the collection. And she teaches us again about that importance of paying attention, not judging, walking with purpose and fully present. Oliver did not walk and listen to a podcast. She did not even carry a camera. She walked with a small notebook, a pencil, and her dog. She brought nothing into those rituals except an open mind. She was not afraid of wild things, nor of her own wild nature. And of the 4 essays in section 1, I think the one that most resonated with me now, and this has changed over my relationship with this book, because I too had an undernourished childhood and an inattentive father. There are so many ways into Oliver's work. But as I sit with this book now and read it again, it's that final essay of Power and Time that anchors me. Oliver encourages the reader to lean into the possibility of being an artist, and at this latter part of my own life, to observe what she calls the 3 selves, and then lean into the one who longs to wrestle with angels. This I'll read from page 24. I am myself 3 selves at least. To begin with, there is the child I was. Certainly, I am not that child anymore. Yet distantly, or sometimes not so distantly, I can hear that child's voice. I can feel its hope or its distress. It has not vanished. And then there is the attentive social self. This is the smiler and the doorkeeper. This is the portion that winds the clock, that steers through the dailiness of life, that keeps in mind appointments that must be made and then met. It is fettered to 1,000 notions of obligation. It moves across the hours of the day as though movement itself were the whole task. And to page 27, certainly there is within each of us a self that is neither child nor a servant of the hours. It is a third self, occasional in some of us, tyrant in others. This is the self that is out of love with the ordinary. It is out of love with time. It has a hunger for eternity. It is 6 a.m. and I am working. I am absent-minded, reckless, heedless of social obligations, etc. It is as it must be. The tire goes flat, the tooth falls out. There will be 100 meals without mustard. The poem gets written. I have wrestled with the angel, and I am stained with light and have no shame. Neither do I have guilt. My responsibility is not to the ordinary or the timely. It does not include mustard or teeth. It does not extend to the lost button or the beans in the pot. My loyalty is to the inner vision, wherever and howsoever it may arrive. If I have a meeting with you at 3 o'clock, rejoice if I am late. Rejoice even more if I'm not there at all. There is no other way work of artistic worth can be done, and the occasional success to the striver is worth everything. The most regretful people on earth are those who felt the call to creative work, who felt their own creative power restive and uprising, and gave it neither power nor time. Yeah. Oliver shares what she's learned through her childhood and now into her adult life, her own 3 selves. She tells us what it is to be different and that all of us are unique. She shares the importance of being connected to something bigger than ourselves, and then the need to close the door and get down to it where there's still time. Again, that need for discipline. All right, section 2 features 3 essays: Blue Pastures, The Ponds, and Sister Turtle. And in section 2, we are plunked squarely into the natural world she observes and loves. We are, from the very beginning, with her. In Blue Pastures, we're with her and Molly on the boat, trying to catch fish. Remember, at this time, and for much of her time in Provincetown, Mary Oliver ate what she caught or scavenged or foraged. Fishing and catching fish then would have been really important, but this day they don't catch any. In this essay, she looks at our responsibility to nature. A neighbor gives them a duck, which they nurse, and then Oliver releases back into the water. A shark is there, and boys with sticks and stones. Oliver cannot stop the shark from taking the duck, or the boys from assaulting the shark. She can only observe how to live among living creatures. She observes what she's seeing on the beach walks: striped bass and squid and skate and octopus. She's respectful, even empathetic for humans and the animals they eat. Oliver eats what others might not, like skate or octopus, and once a friend left a raw bluefish for dinner. As she was cleaning it, she saw alive in the belly of the fish sand eels. She takes the eels, the ones not already dead, and walks to the ocean's edge to release them. Yeah, she's showing us that, yes, we need to eat. We have appetites. We are born to survive. But with that comes a responsibility to do the right thing, to take what we need and ensure what we don't need is cared for. In The Ponds, Oliver turns our eyes to the skies, to great blue herons, American egrets, and then back to the pond, to pickerel and snapping turtles. But the essay I want to spend some time with in section 2 is Sister Turtle. One moment, please. In this book, we don't often hear Oliver talk about anxiety, and this from the beginning puts the reader on edge. And it also activates our sense of empathy for the author. She's doing what she can, seeing what we cannot, sharing what she believes with a sense of brutal honesty, even if it means she may be judged. And I'm going to read from Sister Turtle on page 49. For some years now, I have eaten almost no meat, though occasionally I crave it. It is a continually interesting subject of deep ambiguity. The poet Shelley believed his body would at last be the total and docile servant of his intellect if he ate nothing but leaves and fruit. And I am devoted to Shelley. But I am devoted to nature too. And to consider nature without this appetite, this other creature-consuming appetite, is to look with shut eyes upon the miraculous interchange that makes things work, that causes one thing to nurture another, that creates the future out of the past. Still, in my personal life, I am often stricken with a wish to be beyond all that. I am burdened with anxiety for the lamb with his bitter future, anxiety for my body, and not the least, anxiety for my own soul. You can fool a lot of yourself, but you cannot fool the soul. That warrior. She tells us life is not about how to escape anguish, but how to live with it. And then she helps the turtle lay her eggs safely. And then she goes back and takes 13, replacing 14, back to the nest. I scrambled them, she writes. They were a meal. Not too wonderful, not too bad. So I'm curious if anyone else had a reaction to this essay. Yeah. Yes, it was challenging. I had to go. When I first read this book, I thought, I can't talk about that essay. And then after I read it twice, I'm like, it's the only thing I can talk about. I guess we have to remember she's been foraging for food to keep herself alive, that she never took more than she needed. And in the end, all of us are replaceable. So I have no desire to scramble a turtle egg. But I'm glad Mary Oliver did, and I'm glad she lived so long. Okay, section 3 is my favorite. She lets us into her room, the place where she visits with friends, those old friends she loves, the friends who encouraged her to be disciplined and different, the wonderful artists of her childhood who became the companions of her life. The introduction reads, and this is from page 63. I feel like everyone is going to relate to this. Wherever I've lived, my room, and soon the entire house, is filled with books. Poems, stories, histories, prayers of all kinds stand up gracefully or are heaped on shelves, on the floor, on the bed, strangers old and new offering their words bountifully and thoughtfully, lifting my heart. But wait, I've made a mistake. How could these makers of so many books that have given so much to my life, how could they possibly be strangers? Emerson, Poe, more on Whitman, and ending with Wordsworth. From the beginning of this book, Oliver leans into her love of Emerson, who I admit I was not familiar with before reading this book. Well, I mean, I heard of him, but I didn't know of him. But she brings him alive, the magic of him, the need for those alchemical beings in our midst, thinkers with the gift, like Oliver, of simple words, ideas written for real people. Transformational writing, again as with Oliver, rooted in the natural world. Emerson seeks a peaceful life, a simple life, but in it he seeds the magical, and this ignites something in Oliver. She writes, "The best of literature bends not toward the narrow and the absolute, but to the extravagant and the possible." Emerson speaks of the web of God, perhaps borrowing on the Eastern idea of the web of Indira, that we are all connected. And because of that, our responsibility on the point of the web is to shine and light up the being next to us, to keep the whole thing illuminated. I love this, and I think it returns to Oliver's deeper theme in this collection that we are all indeed connected. She says of Emerson that it's no simple matter to be both inspiration and moderate, and then provides myriad examples from Emerson's writing. And I'll read from page 73. That was kind of magical. She writes of Emerson, "He attached the common word to startling ideas. Hitch your wagon to a star," he advised. "The drop is a small ocean. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. We live amid surfaces, and the true art of life is to skate on them. Sleep lingers all our lifetime in our eyes as night hovers all day in the boughs of the fir tree. Or the soul makes the body. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view," he says. And suddenly, that elite mystical practice seems clearer than ever before and possible to each of us. She educates the reader about Emerson, who radiates light, and then she moves to Poe, whose name rhymes with woe, whose inherent darkness is not a depression, but more like a lack of light. It's all he has ever known, the women he loved dying early. It is no wonder he is so at home in cellars and dark places with ghosts and grief and revenge. And I have to admit, I was not particular about Poe, but Oliver reminds us that while a normal life includes an occasional black mood, all Poe had was the darkness, and still he worked to make something of that. and the futility of love, the futility of everything. She reminds us, as Poe reminded her, we never forget the beloved shall grow old or ill and be taken away finally. No matter how furiously we fight, how tenderly we love, how bitterly we argue, how cunningly we hide, this is what will happen. She knows we will all soon be gone. Poe knew it. Somehow in this knowing, it makes that idea bearable in this book, at least for a moment. In the third essay of this section, we return to Whitman, a deeper dive. This is not the gratitude of a teenage girl, but the observation of a woman who reads deeper into what the poet's offering her. He is, to her, like a prophet. Leaves of Grass was published in 1855, 80 years before Oliver was born. That world, the world of Whitman and nature, had already changed, but an essential truth remained, a truth that she lifts to her own lips and tastes. There is spirituality in this poetry. There is, she tells us, like Emerson, something that is new. It's rooted in that truth of nature and knowing that we are all a part of it. And the responsibility that comes with that. Like Oliver, Whitman is writing for the reader, as she says, that intimate audience of one. The speaker is not the prophet, though. The truth is not made manifest through the writer, but rather through the experience of this writer. Whitman says, touch is the miracle. Oliver knows this and longs to share with her reader the importance of connection with the worlds both inside and outside ourselves. And the last author friend Oliver shares with us is Wordsworth in the final essay, the tongue-twisting Wordsworth's Mountain. Like Emerson and certainly Whitman, Wordsworth has a kind of divinity that surrounds him, the beauty of every day, which was certainly by then seated in Oliver. She writes, and I love this, much is revealed about a person by his or her passion or indifference to the opening of the door of day. So are you thrilled and full of wonder? I am. Oliver is. She ends this chapter and this essay. I'm going to read from page 114. For whatever reason, the heart cannot separate the world's appearance and actions from morality and valor, and the power of every idea is intensified, if not actually created, by its expression in substance. Over and over in the butterfly, we see the idea of transcendence. In the forest, we see not the inert, but the aspiring. In water that departs forever and forever returns, we experience eternity. And there's 2 more sections. Oh my gosh. Okay. In section 4, the longest section in this book, Oliver puts our feet and pulls them firmly back onto the earth, leaving the musing of spirit and magic to do their work. The 8 essays in this section zoom into the wonder of the natural world and the discipline required in order to live within it. Swoon takes us inside a house, a very rare instance in Oliver's writing and this book, as she marvels at a common house spider in its web and 6 egg sacs that sit around her. It underscores the worlds that open when we observe. A cricket gets caught in the web. Spiders emerge from the sacs. Oliver stays inside, learning from something so ordinary that she'd previously given it no thought. She writes, "The world is not what I thought, but different and more." And so we're launched into the theme of this penultimate section of Upstream. The world is not what we think it is. Bird, an essay you might have read outside of this collection, is a heartbreaker. Mary Oliver brings home an injured gull she's found on the beach. The gull is not well, but through love and careful feeding, the bird comes back into its body. Soon they're playing games. She is in awe of the bird's gorgeous curiosity. They bathe him, play Bird classical music. Mary and Molly see in Bird a life that is elegant, exquisite, and an intelligence that surprises them. Friends come to visit. They pet him and applaud him. But as she says, the rough and tumble work of dying was going on, even in that quiet body. Bird was startling, a light, and then, as Mary Oliver says to Molly one morning, the little gull has died. This is a celebration of miracles and light and an opportunity to meditate on endings. In Owls, she takes us back into the forest and the need to be disciplined in order to turn our experiences into art and to appreciate what we witness. Who Cometh Here tells the story of a black bear that makes it to their small town in search of love and a better life, only to be tranquilized and sent back to where it came from. Oliver laments the loss of the bear, wishing for a world in which it could still travel freely. In Ropes, she recounts how the story of a dog came to her, a dog who, like the bear in Who Cometh Here, longs to be free, and her hope that the members of her community can make it possible for that dog to roam freely after all. All right, Winter Hours. In Winter Hours, she takes us down and down into the place where Oliver has not taken us before in this book. It's cold in Provincetown. Winter walks up and down the town, swinging his censure. The darkness is here, and she longs for a kind of hope. Unlike Emily Dickinson's Thing with Feathers, Oliver needs her hope to be a fighter and a screamer. She still gets up before the sun does. This is the beginning of every day. She finds 3 fish on the beach and takes them home, cleans them, marveling at their bloody insides. When the fish are clean, she and Molly fry them, and they are delicious. She takes us from the beach to the woods, where the bodies of her dead dogs are buried. She's leaning into the last days in the forest. How many days there will be after this, she doesn't know. To be in the forest is the only option in any weather. She writes, "For me, the door to the woods is the door to the temple." The final essay in this section, Building the House, compares and contrasts Oliver as a poet with little carpentry skill to the young man who builds houses with great skill, but although he longs to, cannot crack the poet's code. He is young and she is old, but she says, "I don't think I'm old yet or done with growing, but my perspective has altered. I'm less hungry for the busyness of the body, more interested in the tricks of the mind." She's still walking, and she's still living in her beloved Provincetown. The final essay in Upstream is dedicated entirely to that town. The town that has been her home for over half a lifetime, the people who were her friends, the neighbors and their children and their children's children. The grasshopper who eats out of Oliver's hand in that famous poem, The Summer's Day, is eating sugar from the icing of a cake baked by her neighbor. Her life, her work, her art, all of it is rooted in Provincetown. And like the woods of Ohio as a child, this town is changing. It's becoming gentrified. What had been real to her is changing. She longs for the time before when no occupation was considered elite. She will move forward, she has to. Nature has taught her that. But she is sentimental for a time that has passed. And so she ends this book, this potent series of essays that take the reader from her early days and influences right up until that present moment in early 2015 when she says, "I don't know if I am heading toward heaven or that other dark place, but I know I have already been in heaven for 55 years. Thank you, Provincetown." So in the end, this book is a love letter. Mary Oliver shares what she has learned, and she is a generous teacher. She encouraged me to walk before the sun rose that day in March, even if it was cold and icy, even if it seemed I would witness nothing of the natural world, until I heard the caw of a crow growing louder and realized the crows were back after this long winter away. And then to my amazement, that crow flew low over my head, and I heard the beating of its wings. So thank you, Mary Oliver. She teaches the reader, oh yes, she does, to pay attention, to be astonished, to pay attention. As she says, it is our endless proper work. And I'd like now to end where we began in this first essay, Upstream, Mary Oliver indelibly etching her hopes for the future, a world without her, a world where nature continues. She writes, "Teach the children. We don't matter so much, but the children do. Show them daisies and the pale hepatica. Teach them the taste of sassafras and wintergreen, the lives of the blue sailors, mallow, sunbursts, the moccasin flowers. Give them peppermint to put in their pockets as they go to school. Give them the field and the woods and the possibility of a world salvaged from the lords of profit. Stand them in the stream. Head them upstream. Rejoice as they learn to love this green space they live in, its sticks and leaves, and then the silent, beautiful blossoms. She teaches us attention is the beginning of devotion, and that attention without feeling is only a report. Thank you. So I'm told there is typically a question and answer period, which I have thoughtfully not prepared for. And I know lots of you have read the book, and hopefully those of you who haven't had a sense of it from just hearing about the book. And I'm very open to questions, and Erin is here to help. So does anyone have any questions about Mary Oliver's Upstream? Hi, Mick.
Or if there is something residual that Mary Oliver has left you with to inspire an action.
All right. Thank you, Michelina. Mick's asking if I'm inspired to go for a 5 a.m. walk, and again, and if there's anything that's, that this book has left with me or Mary Oliver's left with me. I will say yes to 5 a.m. walking. It gets much easier. Lori Beatty's here. Anyway, it gets much easier in the summertime. The sun rises earlier, and I think there's a lot more to be observed. And I think because of I think I'd like to think I'd be less afraid of the dark, and maybe that's the takeaway too, is that I often live so much in fear, and I know that love is the absolute antidote to fear. So maybe she's challenging me to not be so afraid. Anyone else? Oh, Jen says I can borrow her dog for the walks. Yes?
Actually, my question is more for the organizers, is having read this already, next month's book. It starts out with an inscription from one of Mary Oliver's poems, which I'm wondering, is that just a really big coincidence? Or did someone read this book and go, oh, Mary Oliver has great poems, let's see that.
Interesting. I'll leave that one for Erin or members of the Big Book Club team. But I do like how Mary Oliver is just this web everywhere.
Well, and it's obviously a very apropos line. The line is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Yeah, so the line again is, tell me what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. That's from the poem The Summer Day, which I referred to in my talk. And in it, she asks, tell me who made the grasshopper, this grasshopper. And she's watching the grasshopper in her hand eat the sugar from the cake that the neighbor has baked. And later in her poetry too, she asks a lot more questions, which I think, and that don't need to have answers, but I love that, this sort of questioning. Tell me who made the grasshopper, no, this grasshopper. In terms of the books being connected, I don't know, Erin, do you want to answer that? Jess. It is the field. Yeah, it was the serendipity of interconnectedness. That's what Jess has answered. Did anyone else want to talk or ask a question? Yes. Hi, Liz.
Some of her friends were transcendentalists. I didn't get time to research that. What did they believe?
Okay, well, I am not a Mary Oliver scholar. I am a Mary Oliver fan, but I think in that time of the transcendentalists, like I think Emerson would have been a transcendentalist. So I think what and feel free to weigh in here. I think what he's saying, or what they're talking about, is that the idea that one can kind of elevate through the unseen world. And I don't know if anyone wants to add to that. I'm certainly not a transcendentalist expert. That would be my takeaway. But there was that big movement then, which was also really big in Britain too. That idea that by sitting with things we cannot see and feeling and searching for, I think W.B. Yeats was also a transcendentalist. Anyway, we can somehow supersede our physical bodies and tap into the field, maybe.
So they have transcendental meditation, so maybe that's where that idea came from.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, do anyone want to speak to that? I think that would be a natural kind of progression. Yeah, I think she would have been more of a meditator in nature, though. Yes?
As a creative person yourself, was there anything that she said about supporting your creative process?
Yeah. The question was, as a creative person, was there anything that she spoke to about supporting your creative process that touched me? And I would say it's that essay at the end of section 1, I think, where she just talks about if you feel it, do it. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed. Like wrestle. Actually, I'm mixing up all her essays now, but wrestle with that angel. There's no shame in that, and to just try it. I mean, I'm just trying it. So I think that do not be afraid. Life is short. The time is now, and if something moves you to be creative, to write a poem, and on this, there's a space to write. Write something, share something. Yeah. Are we complete? Oh, no.
I have a question. For me, I find Alberta winters endless. Mary Oliver still able to have these great insights.
That's a great question. I don't know. Like, she was a pretty hard bird, right? She was a smoker and a curmudgeon, and I think if she was saving her life in nature, she would have just, put on those boots and crampons and gone out there. But I don't know. I mean, I can tell you for me, I was skittish on the ice, and I just thought, wow, yay, Mary Oliver. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. My tip to you is find the curling ice. Gets you through your winter. Kerrie introduced us to Mary Oliver's Practiced Open Mind. And I love that this book club, all of you here, are sharing in that practiced open mind by being here. So thank you. It was a wonderful session today, and it was lovely to share that together. Thank you for our last meetup at Marteloup for a while. A reminder that in May, we'll be meeting in Britannia at Temple B'nai Tikva. And in 10 days from now, you can start dropping off your books at the big book sale coming up in May. So that another reminder. Please do the survey for us so we can keep continually improving this book club for all of you.